Well, hi everybody, and welcome to this very special Anzac edition of the DG video. And I'm so glad you could all join us. Do you know Anzac Day is something very special for everybody in Australia? It represents our coming of age as a nation. And all of us, in one form or another, have been touched by the exploits of our young men who fought in a number of wars right across the centuries. In my own case, my grandfather, William, fought at Gallipoli, and he then moved over to the Somme in France, where unfortunately he was gassed with mustard gas at the time. He lost a lung, but he actually returned home with a beautiful young bride to Australia. And he lived in this beautiful suburb of Mornington, where we are today to commemorate this Anzac Day. My dad fought along the islands, right across from New Guinea through to many of the islands in World War II. And Dad didn't tell us a lot about everything that had happened into the war because of the memories that he would have sustained. He preferred to tell us some of the great things that had happened to him, the mateships, the camaraderie that he had with so many of the guys that he'd met and fought with. He also remembered people like the Fuzzy Wuzzy Angels in New Guinea. And of course, he was given an offer at the end of the war to move to Japan as part of the peacekeeping force. Dad had said at that time, there's no way I'm going back to Japan. I want to get home. And of course, he came home. He married a lovely English girl. And of course, the rest of us came down to live in a beautiful place called Chelsea. Our views, our whole nature has been changed by the fact that we have had freedom in this great country. And we'd like to also introduce to you a very special guest today. He's not here at the moment, but if you come with me, we're going to actually introduce you to him, and we're going to get some stories that involve not just the servicemen, but also the Rotary connection. So come on, let's go. Okay, come and join me. Let's see who we've got as our very special guest today. Here he is. It's Daryl Moran, who's passing through governor and also a historian, and we're going to have a great chat to Daryl. We'll see you inside.
Peter, great to see you. Come on in.
So, Daryl, great to have you with us today, and I think it's a very significant day, as I mentioned earlier, about Anzac Day. Can you give us a little bit of detail about why it is so significant for all Australians?
The year of 2026 marks the 110th anniversary of the very first Anzac Day services that were held in Australia, just 1 year after the event. So you can imagine the depth of feeling and emotion for all of the families and those who were involved. So I think over time, Anzac Day has developed into marking three things in particular. One, it's a chance to remember all of the lost lives. And Australia has lost over 100,000 people in war since the Boer War in 1899, 60,000 in World War I, of which 20,000 were never found. So it is a chance on Anzac Day to remember all of those lost lives. Sometimes names are read out, sometimes wreaths are laid. I think the second thing that Anzac Day gives us a chance to do is to give thanks. The very first Anzac Days, and well, when peace was declared in 1918, they had to close all the pubs across Australia because, of course, there was a celebration. But the main thing that happened was that people went to churches and they went and they gave thanks for what had happened and the lives that had been lost. I think the third thing that Anzac Day gives us a chance to do is to look at the sacrifices that those men and women made and gives us a chance to move forward with our lives, particularly basing upon the freedom that those people gave us. I think it's always salutary to remember that not one of those people who gave their lives in war got 1 hour, 1 minute, 1 second to enjoy the freedom that we now enjoy.
And I understand too that there is a Rotary connection, Daryl, we've spoken about. And I think everybody would be really interested to hear from you about that Rotary connection.
I think again, Rotary established in Australia in the early 1920s after World War One. But by World War II, we know that there were about 65 Rotary clubs only right across Australia. War starts, young men in particular head off to do their duty. But we know that during World War II, Rotary focused its efforts not on Bunnings barbecues, but they focused their efforts on community service. So they set up relief efforts for widows. They organised relief for prisoners of war who were being held overseas. And they looked particularly to deal with returned servicemen and women who were coming back and really met a great community need. And incredibly, by the end of World War II, Rotary had grown to over 100 Rotary clubs from 65 before. As that growth continued, as people returned from the war, there seems to have been a generation of people, particularly ex-servicemen and women, who said, look, we don't want that to happen again, so how can we change society and worker society in Australia? And they saw Rotary as a way of meeting that need as a community service organisation. My own father in the early 1950s, as a returned man, was involved in charting a Rotary club in Cobram. And incredibly, by the mid-1950s, Rotary had grown from 100 clubs at the end of 1945 to 370 clubs with over 300 major community projects happening right across the world. So that was real Rotary community service in action.
And of course, it's really interesting, isn't it, with this? And your position as a historian also has some unique stories. Would you like to share perhaps one story that really has touched you in regards to the war and war service?
My colleague and I have just published at the Shrine last year, it was launched at the Shrine, the history of the RAAF in the Burma campaign during World War II. The Burma campaign was the longest land campaign of World War II and inflicted the greatest defeat in Japan's military history. 1,700 plus Australians were involved in the air war there as part of the RAF. But many people weren't even aware that Australians were part of that campaign. Over 300 died, many were in senior positions, and many also were rewarded for their bravery. But when we launched the book last year at the end of the service, the service that we held, a woman came up with a piece of paper, a photocopy, and it was from the Adelaide Advertiser in 1945. And she said, oh, this is about my uncle. My uncle was missing in the Burma campaign. And we were able to go to the book and we could find his entry in the Roll of Honour, but we could find the story as a Spitfire pilot of how he crashed and was killed. No trace, of course, in the massive explosion. But she made the point that in 80 years since that accident had happened, this was the first time they ever knew what had occurred. And I think that again is something that is greatly, perhaps to our shame. We as Australians focus far too much on Gallipoli and far too much on Kokoda. And yet we forget that many other Australians served and gave their lives and sacrificed in many other theatres. And so I think it's incredibly important that Rotary in particular, as a community service organisation, continues to support Anzac Day services, continues to bring communities together as a time to remember those lost lives, as a time to give thanks, and as a time to move forward as a community.
Agreed. And they're really good sentiments. The other thing I'd just like to ask you in finishing up the interview, what do you feel it is why it's so popular these days with Anzac Day, and particularly the numbers of people and families that actually get out to support this great Australian Day?
Back in the 1970s, as a teenager, I can remember hearing society say, well, Anzac Day is hopeless, it's useless, it's just, not needed anymore, we need to grow up and get over. I think through films such as Gallipoli and other events that took place at the time, there was a growing realisation, particularly amongst schools and organisations that brought young people quietly into the Anzac Day services that were happening. And when they were involved, they saw that it wasn't anything to do with glorifying war. It was doing those three things. It was acknowledging the fact that people their age had given up everything they had, including their own lives. And I think we grew a growing pride in the service of our people and a growing recognition that as a country, we'd helped to make the world a better place. And so I think that's the reason that Anzac Days and Remembrance Days are so well supported these days.
Mm. And I think we owe everybody an enormous debt of gratitude, because it is really one of Australia's most important days that we commemorate.
It is.
Daryl, thank you so much for sharing that with us. To everybody, we hope you've enjoyed this very special Anzac Day DG video, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Bye for now.